Hey, Jesse, welcome to the Red Zone Selling Deal Breakdown. Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, for the audience who's going to watch this episode of the Deal Breakdown, give us a little bit of background on yourself, your sales experience, and then we'll get into the details of the deal you're putting in front of us today.
Absolutely. Hey everyone, Jesse Woodbury. I am an enterprise account executive. I've been doing that for basically the last 8 years. Before that, I was sort of in the mid market thing. Spent some time a while back leading an SDR team as well at two different companies, one early stage startup and one growth unicorn company. So overall, over a decade of experience working in SaaS enterprise selling.
Awesome. So, for those of you who are watching the first episode of Deal Breakdown, basically what we're going to do is we're going to get the details from Jesse of a deal he's working. And then we're going to dig a little bit deeper beyond the basics to get to the challenges that he might be having. And then from those challenges that he's having, we're going to talk about what plays he should run or what next steps he should take. That's what this deal breakdown is all about. So, Jesse, I'm going to pull up the form that you filled out. We're going to go through that so everybody has the deets on this, and then we'll get into the rest of it. Sound good?
Awesome. Sounds great.
All right. So, I already know your name. That's good. I'm not going to read your phone number for autonomy sakes, okay?
Please.
All right. So we're going to keep the name of the company out of it so we don't get in any trouble. But it is to sell an AI voice roadside assistant. Explain just a little bit of detail what that means. What does this solution do? What problem does it solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to set the stage here, and I won't disclose who the company is, but it's a large auto manufacturer. And as part of their efforts to improve their customer experience, they're looking for ways to utilize AI through their voice communication channel, their voice support channel. And specifically, this use case was for roadside assistance. They wanted to be able to help customers who have a flat tire or just got into an accident, something along those lines, to have technical support from a mechanic or also emergency support. It's one of the services that they offer as part of owning one of their vehicles. And so they were looking at our enterprise solution for voice translation specifically. The product we sell does language translation across 155 languages so that companies and brands can support consumers and customers in any language, in any country, in any market. And specifically, this was a North America focused deal. They had quite a few customers who were calling in needing support in Spanish and in Japanese and Korean and a handful of other languages. And so they wanted to be able to broaden their support of said customers. And so they are evaluating our language our language translation AI.
Cool. Came inbound about 150,000 in ARR. Your
Mhm.
current stage is the yellow, so you're still in the early stages of this deal. What's driving the decision? Cost containment, greater support impact. The decision on their side or the urgency, is it tied or anchored to anything date-wise that's important to them, like a implementation date or time to market?
This is actually one of the challenges that I've had in the deal is trying to pinpoint a specific compelling date or timeline for this. One of the hardest things in selling customer support software is hearing, we need this yesterday. And I've heard that a lot from my contact at this brand was, oh yeah, we need this yesterday. And so it's been a little bit challenging to try to figure out what their specific timeline is, when they would want to go live with something like this. It is driven by cost containment, cost savings. Right now, there's a large sort of staffing line item related to supporting their multi-language customers. And so they are looking for ways to reduce that cost by implementing automation to help with that process. So, I know that their fiscal year is aligned with the calendar year. And some of the hints that my contact has laid down is that this is tied to next fiscal year, which would be January. He did mention that he planned on spending a few months evaluating the technical aspects of this, but that I'd say is one of the biggest challenges in the deal so far is really getting to a specific timeline.
Okay. Your champion thus far is the director of service operations. Tell me a little bit about this person. Do they have high authority and high influence? What do they look
Yeah,
like internally?
yeah, he's very tenured at the company and quite senior. Despite the director title, I would say he seems to have quite a bit of influence over the team. throughout the calls we've had, he's brought in folks from the IT and engineering side of the business. He's made it very clear that he has a path to the finance and procurement side of the business, and that this is definitely not his first software evaluation. He's been super easy to work with, very responsive, very personable on all the meetings we've had, and frankly has given very good feedback to my team, especially we've done multiple custom demos for their group. And he's been great about providing really, actionable feedback for us to tighten that up and improve for the next one.
Does he also own the budget for this?
That I don't fully have the scope of yet. And that is, potentially another risk factor in the deal, is trying to understand where the budget's coming from for this specific project. And something to consider there too is a lot of what we're selling somewhat of an innovative solution. It's an innovation solution. It doesn't necessarily have a, budget earmarked for voice translation. Sure, there's budget earmarked for staffing on that front, or BPOs, business process outsourcers, that can support language. So most likely the budget will come from one of those areas, but this point of contact, our champion, has not confirmed, specifically where the budget would come from, other than make some hints about being able to pull back on some of their BPO investments.
Other key stakeholders identified. You've got the VP of Ops and the Director of IT. So it looks like you've got your tech buyers here lined up. What is the role of the VP of Ops in this deal?
Yeah, the VP of Ops has just been mentioned. She has not been involved in any of the meetings just yet, but it's my understanding that the sponsorship of this project is she's the sponsor of this particular project based on our champion, but has not participated yet in any of the formal conversations we've had with their team.
And your product or solution, what sort of lift is it to implement? Is it a heavy lift? Is it months of work and hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement? What does that look like?
No, it's actually a fairly straightforward process. Probably 4 to 6 weeks to get it set up. It is built to integrate in with an existing telephony service. In this case, this company is using Genesis, an existing telephony provider, and so we would just work with their webhooks and APIs and connect there. So fairly straightforward. Now, as far as like training and change management, that's probably the longer part of the process, because this is an innovative solution. It's not something that's historically been done very often. There's some team and admin training that has to happen that tends to take most of the time.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good to know. And then you mentioned before close date, you assume it's beginning of the new year. You talked about one of the obstacles being really there isn't a specific date in mind. It's not anchored to anything specifically. So that is a challenge. A couple of others you have here is product limitations. I assume that's on your side. And the other one is, okay, yeah, you mentioned compelling event timeline. Product limitations are your solution's product limitations?
Yeah, and as we referenced a minute ago, the IT and engineering folks have been very involved with this, and so they're pouring through our technology with a very fine-tooth comb. And part of their feedback that they've provided was just that they felt that there was some latency. And just again, to set some context, it's voice AI translation. So an AI voice is going to translate a conversation from English to Spanish, for example. And so the customer hears it in their native language, and then when they respond in Spanish, it's relayed back over through an AI voice translator back to a support agent who's in the US in English. And so one of the things that they've hinted at, or not, I shouldn't say hinted at, one of the things that they've provided feedback on is just the latency of that process, which is probably still faster than a human translator, but not quite as fast as they were hoping for an AI technology. They've also expressed some concerns about the interface and how it would impact the agent workflow, because it does introduce another interface into the mix, to be able to manage the translation in the real-time call scenario. And so they're concerned about not just integration, but just workflow and productivity for agents as well.
So let's dig down into the pain. First of all, is this a rip and replace, or is this additive to what they're doing right now?
This is completely additive. And this is, not just a new product for our company, but it's a new product in the marketplace. There's only one other provider that actually does AI voice translation in the market. So yeah, absolutely not a rip and replace, very much a kind of innovation sale.
Yeah, aspirational sale, right? Like they have
Yep.
to see the vision of this thing. So, what's some of the feedback they provided you about the solution and how they believe it will benefit the company?
Yeah, biggest sort of value points or value drivers that have been identified in the process is cost savings. So the historical way that this has been done in a business like this one is, again, you either hire like a language line type service where there's a human who comes in, and if they have a customer who's calling in roadside, needs help in Spanish, the agent has to dial up a third party and bring in a Spanish interpreter to then brief that person on the scenario and then begin the sort of interpretation process. That is a very slow process. It eats up the agent's time. It's very costly because you typically are paying by the minute for those types of services. And then there's a big question mark around the quality of the conversation because you're just trusting that this third party language provider is saying everything on brand and is providing the best possible service and the right word choices. So the value they see in what we're doing is we're using AI and machine translation technology to provide the best possible translation based on running it through a whole bunch of algorithms and machine learning databases and things like that. But not only that is you don't have to then bring another human into the mix. This is allowing for the same agent to handle that call without having to dial up a third party. And then of course cost savings. So they're paying an annual subscription for these language line BPO type services that offer
Yeah.
this, and so they'd like to be able to consolidate that cost.
Okay. Let me see if I can reiterate what you just said. So in the pain bucket, we've got humans are doing it, and we know humans can make errors in
Mm-hmm.
translation or staying on brand. The other pain is that it costs to hire those folks to do those services that are probably more costly than the solution you're providing. So that's two big pains. And then it's not efficient, right? And then in the benefit side of what you provide is, well, one, you'll lower the cost. Two, it's way more efficient. And three, it's probably way more accurate than they're currently doing today, correct? All right. With that said, and I'm trying to dive into the challenges tied to some suggestions. Let's walk through. So one of the things, have you mapped out with them the key stakeholders in the buying process with them? Do you know who all those people are that have to get involved and have to give a thumbs up, a neutral, or thumbs down?
No, we're still sort of in the middle of that process. Again, we've got our director level champion who's been coordinating all of the technical stakeholders and such. But and I've asked for hey, let's have a one-to-one meeting and talk through, your process for procurement and evaluation and what the criteria is and everything else. And he's wanted to punt that out a little bit until his tech team has given this the full thumbs up. And so that's what we're waiting on next is having the tech team bless this project. And then he said, oh, then I can talk about procurement and building a milestone plan to get this
Okay.
done.
So your champion wants the IT staff to come in and say, okay, you have our blessing, the tech buyer to give the blessing to move it forward. That should happen. Then other key players will be invited to the process.
That's right.
So the other big $1 million question is, have you built a business case for them to help your champion go back internally to share the value and the benefit of your solution?
Beginning that process also, and how that looks for us is to start to understand what the cost per minute is on the, bringing in a third party language interpreter.
Yeah.
Understanding some of the technology costs too, associated with supporting voice conversations. And then also starting to understand some of their contact center metrics. So how long is it typically taking to support a customer in Spanish versus a customer in English? We can understand what the handle times are for those. And as we start to put those metrics together, we can start to paint a picture of cost savings, the efficiency of not having to bring another human interpreter into the mix. And then, of course, sort of long-term outcomes from a CX standpoint, meaning does it improve their NPS score or their customer support scores and things like that. So we're starting to capture the data to build that business case, but that business case has not been fully compiled and presented yet.
And have you confirmed that the money they're spending today, the budget they're using today on the other VoIP type solutions, I assume your cost, they would use that same budget to pay for your solution.
That's the hypothesis, but it has not been fully confirmed yet.
I assume there's probably an overlap period of like, we need to keep doing this until we make sure that this solution's working for us. Which leads me to my next question, tied to the business case. Is I assume you guys do a POC or some sort of a proof of concept or trial, correct?
Absolutely. And that's been already discussed in the early parts of the conversation. And typically, what that looks like is about anywhere from 1 to 3 months, just depending on the business case. For this brand, because it's a pretty high profile company, my leadership is willing to offer a 3 month proof of concept to try it all out and run actual conversations through it before anybody commits to a longer term contract.
Do you need 3 months to prove it out? Is that too long of a time or?
That's a fair question. And the client or the prospect has not specified how much time they would need. So that may be an area where we could shorten the cycle a little bit
Right.
because that was just, it was approved, but not hasn't been fully discussed yet. That's actually a fair point
Because
though.
I
It may not
imagine
take
your
long.
business and other business, if you get a fair amount of volume, in your case, conversations to translate, then you should be able to get that pretty quickly. So to me, one of the suggestions here, Jesse, is maybe it's not based on a time frame. Maybe it's based on volume. Because you don't want your if you give out 3 months, well, you just extended your real ARR out 3 months artificially when you may not need to do that.
That's a,
Um,
yeah, fair point.
So now let's talk about how we can solve your main problem, which is there's no urgency on their side to get this done. That's
Yep.
the biggest challenge here.
Yeah.
Um, there's a couple of routes, and if I pull up my playbook from red zone selling, one of the things again is we need to anchor to something, right? We need to have a conversation with them as why are we talking about this project? What's the level of urgency internally to get this solved? It sounds like we're going to anchor back on those two things or three things: the cost, the efficiency, the human error, right? And you try to pry them out of your champion to get to that. And then I think once you can really get him to state what those things are and the importance of it, say, great. Well, then, right? If I can do this short pilot for you this year, is this something you think you can sign by December 31st? You're now taking, since he won't give you the date, you're kind of working backwards from this to try to create an urgency date if they're not going to give it to you, because it's if that's not going to happen, you've got to be proactive about it. And then you can literally, and then if he agrees and that sounds reasonable, you can then build that into the business plan so you can create the milestones in a mutual action plan to get that forward. But if you don't create the urgency, I think you know this and what we're talking about, this thing can go on forever, right?
Yeah, they could keep kicking the can down the road until IT feels super warm and fuzzy about it, and yeah, that's one of the challenges too is prioritizing this within all the other things that a person like my contact has going on. He's the director of
Yeah.
operations, so he's got a bunch of different projects running at once, and trying to make sure that this is the top of his priority list is a challenge. But I agree that
So
probably
here's
being more
another thing
proactive.
you can anchor to, another suggestion as we talk about this in the book too. Um, People have personal goals and we have company goals. Your champion has personal goals, personal business goals, right? Like things he needs to achieve. I assume he has to knock down projects. Doesn't sound like yours is a heavy lift, especially if we narrow down the pilot. You know, I'm making up his name, John. Hey, John, like where does this sit priority wise? Where does it sit versus the other priorities in level of effort? If the level of effort's lower and the cost is lower than the other ones, hey, John, what do you say since it's a lower effort, lower cost, we move that up? Then you can get a win notched for Q4 as opposed to waiting to Q1 next year. So tie into the emotion of that to see if this is something that piques his interest to like, you're right. I could get a win here, Jesse. This could be something better for me to move up to number two as opposed to number four right now. Another way to anchor, right? I think it comes down to this. Are you your level of relationship with your champion, those conversations we just talked about? Have you started taking the relationship off of email and phone into text and other maybe messaging platforms?
Another slight obstacle, and in some deals I've done in the past, that's been a very easy transition to just move to mobile channels or get one-on-one time with the champion so you can kind of talk through candidly, hey, who's deciding this and who needs to look at that. This point of contact, I mentioned not only is he very tenured at this company, but he's very senior in his career and has kind of punted when I've asked for, cell phone access or one-to-one sessions. He tends to want to bring the whole tribe in. So that is one challenge I'm running into, because I know that when you can get on that one-on-one basis, whether it's on a mobile channel or you're just getting on a Zoom call like this and having a quick stand-up conversation and saying, hey, candidly, let's talk about what it's going to take to get this done. That's going to help accelerate things. But he's been a little bit, apprehensive about doing any kind
This
of
isn't his
one-on-one.
first rodeo, man. He
Yeah,
knows.
he knows.
I give my
That's the
cell
thing.
phone number to this salesperson. Hey, the good
I'm going to
news is
hear.
once you do get that cell phone number, then that you've broken through and
It's a
that
good
you've
sign.
formed a
Yeah.
real relationship. So I'll throw out what we talked about as potential next steps and plays. One is mapping the key stakeholders. I think also building the business case with, I think, a shorter path to what a POC could look like, and try to anchor to urgency based on the win for your champion here, right? Maybe that's the thing that will drive him home of looking good internally and providing a better solution. Is there anything, Jesse, that you want to add to that list? Does that sound like a good kind of next steps to follow up on?
No, this is great. It gives me a couple of things to reach out in the short run here in the next week or so and get some closure on. So no, I think that's a great starting point for getting better threaded in this deal and building some momentum.
Well, awesome. Thanks for coming on and share. This is not an easy thing to do sometimes, right? Uh, Especially doing it real time, right? Like we didn't rehearse this, so
No, and it's easier to do it with you than it is sometimes with the VP of sales. So
it kind of feels like we've done this before for some reason, doesn't it?
yeah, it's almost like we've done this before for sure.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on the Deal Breakdown. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Vince.